The first time she looked at me that way, I knew I was crossing into dangerous territory. My sister's best friend, older, untouchable, and yet, when she whispered, "You shouldn't be here," all I could think was, that's exactly why I came. The night felt unusually still, the kind of silence that makes every sound louder than it should be. My sister had gone out for the evening, and I had no real reason to be at her house except for one, though I hadn't admitted that to myself yet. I told myself I was just stopping by, that I might grab a few things I'd left behind, maybe keep her company later. But deep down, I knew there was another pull guiding my steps. When I opened the front door, I didn't expect to find anyone waiting. The house was dimly lit, the glow of a single lamp spilling across the living room. And there she was, my sister's best friend. She was curled up in the corner of the sofa, a book resting on her lap, though she wasn't reading. Her head tilted up the moment she noticed me, her expression shifting from calm to startled in an instant. She was dressed simply, soft knit sweater, dark jeans, but on her it looked effortless, almost elegant. There was a poise about her that seemed unshaken even in surprise. Her eyes narrowed slightly, more from concern than annoyance. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low, firm, but not unkind. I felt something stir in me, something I'd been trying to ignore every time our paths crossed. Instead of shrinking from her words, I met her gaze and answered, almost before I could stop myself. "That's why I came." The air between us shifted. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet undeniable. She closed her book slowly, setting it aside with careful precision, as though buying herself time to decide how to react. For a moment neither of us moved. The silence stretched, thick and charged, filled with everything unsaid. I stepped further inside, the faint scent of jasmine greeting me, hers unmistakable. It seemed to cling to the warm air around her, weaving itself into my senses. The lamplight caught the loose strands of her hair, making them shine like threads of gold against the darker waves. Her eyes softened, though she tried to mask it. "Your sister isn't home," she reminded me, as if to anchor the situation back to something safe, something rational. "I know," I said quietly. There was no accusation in her silence, only hesitation. She shifted slightly on the sofa, drawing her legs under her, as if bracing herself against the direction this conversation might take. My heart beat louder than I wanted it to, the sound almost embarrassingly obvious in my chest. But I stayed, standing a few feet away, caught between the urge to retreat and the need to stay close. She gestured faintly toward the armchair across from her. "You should sit. Just for a minute." Her words sounded like a dismissal, but the softness in her tone betrayed her. She wasn't pushing me away, not yet. I lowered myself into the chair, the space between us both too near and not nearly close enough. The warmth of the lamp, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the faint brush of her perfume in the air, it all pressed in on me. And as I sat there, under her watchful gaze, I realized that nothing about this night was going to be ordinary. The quiet tension of the living room lingered, but she was the first to break it. With a subtle tilt of her head, she asked if I wanted tea. Her voice was calm again, careful, almost too casual, as if she were determined to fold this moment into something ordinary. I followed her into the kitchen, the sound of our footsteps echoing softly against the tiles. She moved with a quiet confidence, pulling mugs from the cabinet, filling the kettle with practiced ease. I leaned against the counter, trying not to stare too long, but every detail drew me in, the way her sweater clung loosely to her frame, the way a strand of hair slipped from behind her ear and brushed her cheek as she worked. When the kettle began to hum, she glanced at me, one brow slightly raised. "So, why are you really here?" I offered a half smile, though my chest tightened at the question. "Maybe I just wanted company." Her lips curved faintly, but not quite into a smile. "You have plenty of company your own age, don't you? Why bother with someone like me?" I felt the weight of her words. She wasn't fishing for flattery. If anything, she was bracing herself against an answer she didn't want to hear. I took a slow breath. "Because you're not just someone like you. You've known me since I was younger. You've seen me at my most awkward, most foolish. But somehow, you never looked at me with judgment. That made her pause. The kettle whistled sharply, filling the silence, and she turned quickly to pour the water. I caught the faintest crease near her mouth when she tried to suppress a smile. We carried the mugs to the small kitchen table. The air smelled faintly of chamomile, steam curling between us, blurring the line of sight for a fleeting second. I sat across from her, the table narrow enough that our knees brushed beneath it when we shifted. The touch was accidental, but it sparked something undeniable. She glanced down briefly, as though acknowledging the contact without daring to name it. Then she lifted her eyes to me, softer this time. You were always the little brother. The one tagging along, asking too many questions, sneaking cookies when your sister and I weren't looking. I laughed, the memory warming me. I guess some things haven't changed. I'm still here, still asking questions I probably shouldn't. Her gaze lingered, searching my face as if she might find the boy she remembered hidden beneath the man I'd become. And yet, in that silence, I felt her notice the difference, the shift neither of us could deny. The warmth of the tea seeped into my palms as I held the mug, grounding me. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the small details, the soft rise and fall of her breath, the way the light touched her skin, the unspoken history threaded between us like a fragile rope pulled taut. We talked a little about safe things, my sister's latest plans, her work, the books she loved. Yet beneath every word was a current of something deeper, something we were both pretending not to feel. And when her laugh came, sudden and genuine, her hand briefly grazed mine on the table. It was a fleeting touch, so light it could have been nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of everything. The tea had grown cold by the time I finally set my mug down. We'd been talking for nearly an hour, circling around ordinary topics, but the weight of everything unsaid was heavier than every word we'd spoken. She leaned back slightly in her chair, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Her eyes were softer now, but behind them was something conflicted, as though part of her wanted to draw closer while another part reminded her to keep her distance. You know this isn't a good idea, she said at last. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the faintest edge of vulnerability in it. I tilted my head. What isn't? Her lips pressed together for a moment before she answered. This. Us sitting here. Talking like this when your sister isn't home. I didn't look away. It's just tea. Her smile was small, almost sad. You and I both know it's not just tea. The room felt smaller after she said that. I could hear the faint tick of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, even the soft rustle of her sweater when she shifted. Everything ordinary felt sharpened, intensified, as though the world itself was holding its breath with us. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. If you really didn't want me here, you could have told me to leave the moment I walked in. Her gaze faltered, flickering down toward her cup, then back to me. I should have, she admitted quietly. But I didn't. The silence that followed was charged. My pulse quickened, though I tried to remain still, steady. Across from me, she wrapped her hands around her mug, as if anchoring herself to something safe. After a moment, she stood, carrying her cup to the sink. I watched the way she moved, graceful, deliberate, but with a slight stiffness that betrayed her unease. When she turned back, I rose too, not wanting to break the invisible thread between us. I should get going, I said finally, though my voice carried no real conviction. Her expression shifted, relief mixed with something else, something almost disappointed. She walked me to the door, each step echoing softly in the quiet house. As I reached for the handle, she lingered just a little too close. I could feel the warmth of her presence, the faint brush of her breath against my shoulder. For a moment neither of us moved. Then, as I turned to leave, her hand brushed lightly against my sleeve. It could have been accidental, just the smallest touch, but it wasn't. The warmth of it lingered, searing into me, long after she pulled back. Good night, she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I looked at her one last time, the lamplight casting a gentle glow over her face, before stepping out into the night. The cool air hit me instantly, but it did nothing to quiet the heat still running through me. As I walked away, I realized the truth. She wanted me to leave, but she hadn't truly let me go. And neither had I. For a few days, I tried to stay away. I buried myself in work, met up with friends, convinced myself that what happened in the kitchen that night was nothing more than a passing moment, a slip in judgment. But no matter how many excuses I made, her face kept returning to me, the softness in her voice when she said goodnight, the way her hand had brushed against my sleeve. It was enough to pull me back. I told myself I had a reason. My sister had left something in my car the week before, and it seemed logical to drop it off. That was the excuse, anyway. But I knew it wasn't the truth. The truth was simpler, harder, and impossible to ignore. I wanted to see her again. When I arrived, she wasn't inside this time. The house felt empty until I heard faint sounds from the backyard, the scrape of a trowel against soil, the rustle of leaves. I stepped out onto the patio and saw her in the garden. She was crouched near the flower beds, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied loosely at the back of her neck. There was a streak of soil across her wrist, and yet she looked radiant. Different. Softer somehow. She glanced up, startled at first, but her expression quickly melted into something more guarded. "You again," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I lifted the small bag in my hand. "My sister left this in my car. Thought I'd drop it off." Her eyes flicked to the bag, then back to me. "She could have picked it up later. I was in the neighborhood." The lie sounded thin even to my own ears, but I didn't take it back. She shook her head, half amused, half resigned. "You're terrible at excuses." I smiled, moving closer until I stood at the edge of the garden bed. "Maybe I just wanted to see what you were up to." Her hands were covered in soil, but she lifted them anyway, gesturing to the half-planted row of flowers. "This is me. Exciting, isn't it?" But there was something charming in her simplicity, something grounding. I found myself watching not just what she was doing, but how she did it, the care in her movements, the patience. "You make it look good," I said before I could stop myself. "I don't think I've ever seen you like this." Her cheeks colored faintly, and she looked down at her hands. "Covered in dirt? That's flattering." "No," I said quietly. "Real." Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a moment, the world felt perfectly still. I crouched down beside her, reaching for the gardening gloves she'd set aside. As I handed them back, my fingers brushed hers. The soil was rough, her skin warm, the contrast striking enough to send a jolt through me. She didn't pull away immediately. The touch lasted only a second, but in that second, I saw her defenses falter. She exhaled softly and murmured, "You shouldn't keep coming back like this." But she didn't tell me to leave. And that silence told me more than words ever could. The weather shifted the following week. Heavy clouds rolled in, thick and gray, and by evening the rain was steady, drumming against rooftops and windows in an endless rhythm. I hadn't planned to see her that night, but somehow I found myself there again, standing at the edge of her porch, water dripping from my jacket. She opened the door before I could knock, as though she had been expecting me. Her eyes widened slightly, but there was no anger, just surprise softened by something unspoken. "You'll catch a cold out here," she said quietly, stepping aside. I slipped inside, shaking off the damp. The house was warm, filled with the faint scent of candle wax and tea. A single lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, casting soft, golden light across the space. Outside the storm raged, but inside it felt hushed, private, as if the world beyond the walls didn't exist. We sat close, the distance between us smaller than it had ever been. She curled one leg beneath her on the couch, pulling a blanket across her lap. I settled beside her, not touching, but close enough that the warmth of her body reached me. The rain filled the silence, each drop against the glass like a steady heartbeat. For a while neither of us spoke. She toyed with the edge of the blanket, her fingers brushing the fabric again and again, a nervous rhythm she didn't seem aware of. Finally, she broke the silence. "This has gone further than it should." Her voice was soft, but it carried weight. I turned to her, watching the faint crease between her brows, the way her eyes flickered toward me and then away. I know, I said. My voice felt rougher than I intended. But pretending it isn't happening doesn't change the fact that it is. Her hands stilled on the blanket. She drew in a quiet breath, her lips parting as if to speak, but for a long moment she didn't. Then, almost too softly to hear over the rain, she whispered, "I've thought about this more than I should." The words hung in the air like a confession neither of us could take back. My chest tightened. I reached out, hesitating for the briefest second before letting my hand rest over hers. Her skin was warm, softer than I'd imagined, and though she could have pulled away, she didn't. Instead, she turned her hand, her fingers slipping into mine, holding on. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "So have I." Her eyes lifted to mine then, unguarded for the first time. There was no disguising the conflict in them, fear, longing, doubt, but there was also a spark of something undeniable. Neither of us moved closer, not yet. There was no kiss, no dramatic embrace. Just the quiet weight of her hand in mine, her thumb brushing softly across my skin as though memorizing the shape of me. The storm outside kept raging, but inside the world had narrowed to this: the sound of rain, the warmth of her hand, and the silent truth neither of us could ignore anymore. It wasn't safety we were finding in each other. It was something far more dangerous, and far more real. The storm had passed, but the air between us was still charged, heavy with the things we had admitted in whispers. After that night, we both knew there was no going back to how things were. The next time I saw her, the atmosphere was different from the start. She tried to act natural, pouring coffee into 2 mugs as if this were any other morning. But her movements were quicker than usual, sharper at the edges. Her smile, when it came, didn't quite reach her eyes. I watched her carefully, leaning against the counter. "You're quiet," I said. She set the pot down a little too firmly, her shoulders tense. "Because I've been thinking. And the more I think, the more I realize, this can happen." Her words landed hard, but I stayed still, my hands wrapped around the mug she handed me. "Why not?" "You know why." She turned, pacing across the kitchen, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Your sister. The age difference. The way people would look at us. It's not fair, to her, to you, to me." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She stopped, her back to me, as if gathering herself. I set the mug down and stepped closer, though not enough to crowd her. "You think I haven't thought about all of that?" "I have. Every reason you're listing, I've gone over it 100 times in my head. But none of it matters when I'm here with you." She shook her head, her hair brushing against her shoulders as she turned away. "It matters. It has to." For a moment, I thought she would push me out the door. But then she froze, her hands pressing against the counter, as if bracing herself. When she finally turned, her eyes were glassy, unshed tears catching the light. I stepped forward, my voice quieter now. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I didn't come here because it was easy. I came here because of you." Her lips parted, trembling with words she couldn't seem to form. And then, without speaking, she let her arms fall to her sides and closed the distance between us. She didn't kiss me. Instead, she rested her head against my chest, her forehead pressing lightly against me as though testing if I was real, if I would hold steady. I wrapped my arms around her slowly, carefully, afraid to move too quickly. Her body trembled faintly against mine, but as the seconds passed, her breathing steadied, syncing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. The moment felt fragile, suspended in time, like glass that could shatter with the slightest pressure. Yet there was also a strength in it, a quiet acknowledgement that we had both stopped running from the truth. Her voice came muffled against me. "I don't know if I can do this." I rested my cheek against her hair, breathing in the faint scent of jasmine and rain. "Then don't decide tonight. Just let yourself be here. With me." She didn't answer. But she didn't pull away either. And in that silence, I felt the walls she had built begin to crumble. Morning light spilled softly through the curtains, filling the room with a pale gold glow. The storm from the night before had left the world washed clean, the air outside bright and cool. Inside, everything felt quieter, steadier, though the echoes of what we had shared lingered in the silence between us. She sat on the sofa, legs tucked beneath her, a mug of coffee cradled in her hands. Her hair was loose now, falling over her shoulders in soft waves, and there was something gentler about her face, less guarded, though not entirely free of worry. I joined her, sinking into the cushion beside her. The space was narrow, and without meaning to, our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. For a while, we didn't speak. There was no need. The night before had changed something, even if we hadn't given it words. Eventually, she turned her head toward me, studying me in that thoughtful way she had. Her eyes searched mine, as if looking for some sign of hesitation. But I held her gaze steady and sure. "You make this sound simple," she murmured at last. "Maybe it is," I said softly. "Maybe we just make it complicated because we're afraid." Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. She set her coffee aside and leaned back, her body shifting until her knee brushed lightly against mine. The small touch sent warmth spiraling through me, stronger than any grand gesture could have. "I don't know where this leads," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "And I can't promise it won't be messy." I nodded, understanding. "I'm not asking for promises. Just moments. One at a time." Her eyes softened then, the tension in her shoulders easing. She reached up, almost hesitantly, and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. Her fingers lingered against my temple, sliding down to rest lightly along my cheek. The touch was feather soft, but it anchored me completely. I leaned into it, closing my eyes briefly, savoring the warmth of her skin against mine. When I opened them again, she was smiling, a real smile this time, small but unguarded, the kind that made her look younger and yet more herself all at once. "I don't know what we're doing," she whispered, her thumb brushing gently across my cheek. "Neither do I," I replied. "But I know it's worth finding out." The world outside carried on, birds calling faintly, cars passing in the distance, but inside, it felt as though time had slowed to a gentler rhythm. There were no declarations, no promises of forever. Only the quiet certainty that for this moment, she was here, and so was I. Her hand slipped into mine again, fingers weaving together naturally, as if they belonged there. She let out a soft breath, leaning her head against my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her carefully, pulling her close, not to claim her but simply to hold her. And in that stillness, with her warmth pressed against me and sunlight painting the room in gold, I realized something. It wasn't about breaking rules or defying expectations. It was about finding something rare, something real. Something worth holding onto. 1.